What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot of volleyball to get into, such as the Orange County Stunners. They are the 2023 NVA Champions. How did they do it? Who did they beat along the way? And just how were they able to just get back to their dominant selves? Also, who called it? How did I predict those Stunners to basically win the NVA playoffs? I called it. I basically predicted the entire NVA playoff field as well. Not to brag or anything, but I was correct. Other than that, the Big Ten women's volleyball preseason poll also came out, as Wisconsin is the favorite, but not too far behind them is Nebraska and Minnesota, and also Penn State, can't sleep on them as well. Also, the AVP has a tournament as the Atlanta Open is on tap this week as we get the first Gold Series tournament. Also, we had the Challenger Cup in the FIVB last weekend, as that's also important, as you're about to find out why. So, hand me a volleyball, set the net, because I'm about to serve up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all the sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday evening, Monday afternoon, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way to episode 205 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's do this thing. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on several different streaming platforms or social media platforms, such as Twitter, or X, as we're now calling it, Instagram, TikTok, which you can follow them at IE Sports Radio. They're also available on Facebook. All you just gotta do is type in the word IE, then sports, then radio in the search bar, see the IE Sports Radio icon, like them, and then boom, that's how you're able to follow them on Facebook. We also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go there, you will see all the latest sports news, our sports radio, our blog, our Hall of Fame, our Fans of the Month, our pages dedicated to our podcasts, and our community forum. And also, stop by the merchandise shop, which, for the time being, we also have a 10% off code, which is IESR Summer Sale, all in capital letters, and then it's 2023. If I'm not mistaken. I'll probably tweet that out later on in the show on my Twitter account, or X account, at set_point.ie. Also, IE Sports Radio has a sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. This is some of the best jerky you can get your hands on, and for a limited time, you can win 4 tickets to see the Storm or 4 bags of jerky. All you just have to do is go to their website, www.planetjerky.net, place your order, follow them on Instagram at planetjerky, and DM them that you bought your jerky by hearing this ad. You will then be entered into a raffle that actually ends tomorrow. And once again, huge shout out to our sponsor, Planet Jerky, Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, a jerky that is on a whole other planet. And thank you to everyone for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports, because for the past 9 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we're ready to take the next biggest step. And thank you to everyone for all of your support, especially not only for this show, but for all of our shows. We are currently at 31 shows, if my math has served me correctly. And if you are listening live on Spreaker, I hope you are listening live. And if you have a Spreaker account, definitely interact. And if you're following Setpoint on X or Twitter or whatever you're calling it, that is at set_point.ie. Also, Setpoint has an Instagram account at set_point.iesr. It took me a while to actually make that account, but it is up and going, and hopefully I'll be able to get it going through this volleyball season. I was able to get it going. It has all my interviews regarding the NVA postseason, which if we were following along, then that's how you're able to get it and see it. Anyway, so on to the content that you're listening to right now, as Mikey Two Guns or Mike C is in the chat room live on Spreaker. He says, "Hey, bud." And Mike Pat is also in the chat room. He says, "Good evening, Teran." They are the hosts of our Boston show, Our Bleepin' City, and our DMV show, Let's Whine About DMV Sports. Definitely do check out those shows. Without any further delay, let's do this thing. So we have to, hence the word have to, get into the NVA playoffs, as that was last weekend. Started from Friday all the way through Sunday. It was a 3-day event, just like all the events at the NVA. And it started at 10 a.m. on Friday, and it began with the San Diego Wild taking on the Stingers. Now, like I mentioned on last Monday show, I picked the Wild to win this one. I had a feeling they would pull out this win just because I felt they had a good enough roster to pull it out, just because even though they have kind of had the most off and on team in terms of the number of talent, I felt they just had that it factor, because they do a great job of dealing with the players that they have no matter who they have. So in the match, they took the first set 25-20. It was kind of a back and forth match until the Wild kind of found separation. They had Joel Auerkamp and Brandon Rattray available, as well as Sam Berge, who was really doing wonders for their team early on. Meanwhile, for the Stingers, they had Inavel Ramiro, Jorge Mencia, Zebra, a.k.a. Reed, Mikael Hoyt, but he just likes to be called Zebra, but it is what it is. Adam Karnik also pops into the chat room. He says, "Bump, set, spike." Yes, that's the old saying, bump, set, spike. That was the first set. Second set, it looked like it was also going to go the Wild's way, but the Stingers managed to turn the tide late, and they took that set 25-22. They got some really tough serving from Inavel Ramiro. He had 3 aces through 2 sets. Jorge Mencia had 9 kills through 2 sets. And honestly, those two were basically on a tear for the Stingers. And the best part was they actually had enough players to the point where they didn't have to have their head coach or owner, as well as their owner, have to suit up. So that was a good thing for the Stingers. Then the third set was probably the craziest set, as that set, it looked like it was going to go the Stingers' way, as once again, Inavel Ramiro was just serving tough. He had 3 aces in that set, and he even put his team at set point at 24-23. But to the Wild's credit, they were able to outlast, I think, 1 or 2 set points from the Stingers. And it took, I think, 7 set points from the Wild, but they were able to take the third set 32-30, as the Wild, that was probably the most crucial set that they won, because if they don't take that third set, then most likely this one's going 5, as they had a lot of help in this match. They did not have the likes of Matt Knigge. They did not have Kendall Ratter. They also did not have I'm blanking on one guy's name. They also didn't have Brett Alderman, their primary setter. They had Chris Griebenow, who filled in as setter, but they normally run 6-2 offense, most likely, but he did a great job filling in at setter, or being the starting center, or starting setter. So either way, the Wild were just perfect at the setter position. And then the fourth set, they just ran away with it in the fourth set. I wouldn't say ran away with it, but it took them a while to pull away. after the media timeout, they just basically found their fire, and they wound up winning the fourth set 25-19. There was the possibility it could have gone 5 sets, but I will also say this. I feel that the Wild basically started catching fire after that media timeout. I feel that they found their footing and that Brandon Rattray really started to find his flow in his game. And honestly, I will say, this was kind of the Brandon Rattray weekend. And Joel Auerkamp also did wonders for his team. And this is the game. And also, another player that the Wild did not have was Lior Schiffer. So no Lior Schiffer, no Matt Knigge, no Kendall Ratter, no Brett Alderman, but the Wild were still able to pull out the win, which was huge for them. So they won their first ever playoff match, and they advanced to the semifinal. So I will say this for the Stingers, not having Kevin Coburn really hurt, because he actually got hurt earlier in the week, so that really dampened the Stingers, and not having Shane Holdaway also hurt them. But they had Inavel Ramiro. He had 16 kills, 6 service aces. Jorge Mencia, 15 kills, 3 blocks. Unfortunately, it was just not enough. Zebra, or Mikhail Hoyt had 8 kills. Unfortunately, like I said, the Stingers just could not get that tight third set, which I think was the difference. Last year, they actually won a tight third set against the Orange County Stunners in the playoffs, but sadly, this wasn't the case, as they just fell short to another playoff run after a pretty good regular season, which saw them tying for the division title. But unfortunately, that ended their playoff run as the Wild advanced to the quarterfinals. Next matchup we had was the Orange County Stunners taking on the New Jersey Freedom. So the first set, early on it was the Freedom leading, but then the Stunners kicked it into overdrive and they took the first set 25-18. Stunners practically had most of their top guys here. They had the likes of Corey Chavers here, Matt Hilling, Spencer Olivier, their newcomer. Nick West was there as well. He had a service ace. Ignacio Roberts was setting the ball really well. The New Jersey Freedom, I won't say that they were bad, because Joe Norman was doing everything possible to try to will his team to victory, but I feel he just could not get that second gear. He just could not get that Robin to his Batman. The second set was a little bit more different, as that set could have gone either way for both teams, but for the Freedom, fortunately, they were able to grind it out. They had that Jersey grit, and they took it the second set 26-24. And honestly, that's kind of because Joe Norman had 8 kills. He doubled his kill total, and they also got some help from Matt Seifert, Ian Cap. I feel that was kind of a blip on the radar, and I feel that was also a little bit of adversity never hurt anybody. So for the Stunners, it was kind of a little bit of a no big deal thing, even though for the Freedom, it really showed that they have grit and determination. Now the third set was a little bit closer than most people think. I will say this about the Freedom, they're gritty as heck. They were down 19-16. They went on a 5-0 run. They're up 21-19. And suddenly I'm thinking, maybe, hence the word maybe, the Freedom could be going up 2-1. But then the Stunners closed out the set on a 6-1 run to take the set 25-22, as they got really good serves from Nick West, as well as some of their other good servers, as Chavers led the way. Well, actually, no, Matt Hilling led the way with 13 kills through 3 sets. Chavers had 10 kills. Spencer Olivier had 9 kills. Joe Norman had 11 kills for the Freedom. Ian Cap had 7 kills right behind him. Tim Ferreter and Tom Burrell each had 6 kills. So for the Freedom, they weren't playing bad, and I give them a lot of credit for basically still being in that set, but sadly, and it's so unfortunate that when you're facing the Stunners, you basically have to really side out well, because if you're not, then you're going to be at the mercy of the Stunners. And something that kind of boggled my mind is that the Freedom shuffled around their liberos. They actually had John Cunningham available in this match. They had him start at the libero position, I think, in set 1, and then set 2 and 3, they just went with Sam Schuldenberg. That could be because John Cunningham was a little rusty because he wasn't at events 4 and 5, but I don't know. It might have been rust. I'm not sure, but I just think maybe Sam Schuldenberg was maybe the better option going forward. And then set 4, it was tight until the Stunners kind of crossed 21, and then they really kicked into overdrive. There was a little bit of a scary moment where Joe Norman actually collided with one of his teammates for the ball, and he actually kind of hit, I think his head hit one of the body parts of his teammates. I think Joe Norman's head hit the elbow of his teammate, and he was down for a little bit and he had to go out. That, I think, kind of rattled the Freedom a little bit, but in the end, I don't think it necessarily mattered all too much because eventually Norman came back in, but eventually the Stunners took that fourth set 25-20 and the match as Olivier and Chavers led the way with 13 kills each. Hilling and Olivier each had 13 kills. Chavers had 12 kills. Nick West, who Matt Prosser says he doesn't do the big things, but he does some of the little things. He had 4 kills and 3 service aces. Grant Maroki had 4 kills, no errors, which I think is underrated. You'll be hearing a little bit of that later on in the segment here. He had no hitting errors. He had 4 kills. He had 1 block and 1 ace. Freedom were led by Joe Norman, who had 15 kills, while Ian Kapp had 11 kills, 2 service aces. Tim Ferder had 9 kills. Unfortunately, it was just not enough, as the Freedom also missed 23 serves, which that is really going to hurt you, especially when you're playing the Stunners. Like, you cannot miss that many serves. If you miss that many serves against the Stunners, you are going to be at the mercy of them, because they are going to be lashing out serve after serve after serve after serve after serve. You're not going to win a lot of games when you're missing 23 serves. Whether it's against the Stunners or against any team, you're just not going to win that many games, or any game at all. All right, so that is that for that matchup. So next quarterfinal matchup was the Inland Empire Matadors taking on the Las Vegas Ramblers. So unfortunately for the Matadors, this was kind of the matchup where everything was against the Matadors. They didn't have a head coach. They didn't have the players that they had, a good portion of the players that they had in Event 5, like J.R. Norris the fourth. It sadly was everything was like against the Matadors, which really sucked. And then the Ramblers were just the Ramblers in this match. The Ramblers practically had everybody available for them for the most part. As the first set, the Ramblers took it 25-18, and there was a little bit of a moment where the Matadors were actually up 10-8, but then the Ramblers just said, wait, we're the Ramblers, we're the number 1 seed, we should actually be playing good volleyball. And they basically took off the kid gloves, and they basically smacked around the Matadors. And yeah. So through that first set, the Ramblers had Felix Chapman leading the way with 6 kills. Believe it or not, Felix Chapman actually only played that one set. After that first set, Felix Chapman just took the rest of the match off. And I give a lot of credit to Miguel Monterola for basically letting him do that, which you want to preserve your players' health, and you don't want them to basically overexert themselves and whatnot. For the Matadors, they had to lean on Cesar Medina, who basically had to play Superman just because you don't want to basically, or they had to lean on Cesar Medina just because he was kind of their best option outside of Christian Ventura, but he's their setter, so yeah, that's a thing. So in the second set, it was kind of more of the same, as the Ramblers wound up winning that one by the same score of 25-18. And through that set, the Ramblers just practically got to play everybody, as through that set, Felix Chapman was still leading the way with 6 kills, but he didn't get to play because, like I said, Miguel Monterola gave him the rest of the match off, as Jalen Penrose, Colton Cowell, Jacob Vanderbeek, Kevin Voss, Matt West, Jonathan Carlson, all those guys got to really play the rest of the match. Meanwhile, for the Matadors, they had to basically scrap, to basically score points. Cesar Medina was trying his very hardest to try to get as many points as he could. And the problem with the Matadors is that even though that the Ramblers were missing a bunch of serves and whatnot, the Ramblers only had 2 hitting errors. The Matadors had 8 through 2 sets. And it sucks because the Matadors, I know with more players on hand and with J.R. Norris IV, maybe they'd have a better chance. They'd have a boxer's chance. But sadly, this was not the case. And then the third set, the Ramblers just took that one 25-17. And the Ramblers were led by Colton Cowell, who had 7 kills, 2 service aces. And I feel this could have been a whole lot better if we got to see the Matadors' potential. If we got to see the Inland Empire Matadors team like they had against the Florida Southern Exposure, I think we could have seen a whole better match. But sadly, I don't want to say the Matadors, when they got to the playoffs, they just basically just didn't show up. I just feel like we kind of could have seen a whole lot better matchup here. But it is what it is, and sometimes we just can't control what we can't control. And it's a bummer. The Matadors, one thing that just was against them was that they had 13 hitting errors. And it sucks because they had to basically work around those really tall players from the Ramblers, like Jalen Penrose and Matt West, Kevin Vaz. It was so tough to work against those Ramblers players. So that's that for that matchup. Then the last quarterfinal matchup we had was Texas Tyrants versus Puerto Rico Pythons. First set, it kind of was surprising to see the Pythons a little bit sluggish, but the Tyrants being the best team in the regular season, now the best team in the postseason, the number 1 overall seed and the number 1 team in the National Conference, they took the first set 25-16. They were led by, they didn't even have too many kills in that first set, as Gianluca Grasso had 3 kills to lead them in that first set, while Jair Santiago and Giovanni Torres were doing their best to try to lead the Pythons. The Tyrants were basically serving tough and doing everything possible to make everything tough on the Pythons, who were making their first ever playoff debut. So the second set, it was basically more of the same. I mean, the Pythons got it. We're making it closer at the midway point, but the Tyrants were basically kicking it into overdrive. As once they crossed 20, it was basically the Pythons had no shot. As the Tyrants took the second set 25-16. As the Tyrants, through 2 sets, they were led by Jake Langlois. Now, I don't know what was going on, but the PA announcer could not pronounce Jake Langlois' last name. So I don't know if it's pronounced Langlois or Langlois. I think it's pronounced Langlois. I always thought it was Langlois, but now I think it's pronounced Langlois. But no offense to the PA announcer. Bless his heart, Bruce. I don't know his last name, but he was pronouncing it Langlois. But bless that PA announcer. But it is pronounced Langlois, which I think is pretty funny. But Jake Langlois had 7 kills, 2 aces, and 2 blocks, while Jair Santiago had 6 kills for the Pythons. Now, the third set was rather eventful, if you ask me. So it looked like it was closing time, as my boy It's Drewski was following along on Twitter, and he said it was closing time, but the Pythons, to their credit, were clawing their way back, or slithering their way back, and they actually tied up the match at 23 following a block at the net, and it was probably the most disrespectful block. So if you saw the video clip, it was Jair Santiago blocking Austin Matautia, as that block actually went off of the face of Jake Langlois, and then it went out of play. And that was the most disrespectful block out there. So in case you're keeping track, Jair Santiago blocked Matautia, and then it went off the face of Langlois, and then it went out of play. So that's basically a double whammy right there. And then after that block, it was 23-23, and then basically it took 7 match points for the Tyrants to close out the match, and they actually had to dodge 7 match points. And believe it or not, I was sitting right in front of Texas Tyrants fans, and one of them was actually keeping track of the Tyrants' match points. And thank you to those Tyrants fans for keeping track of the match points that the Tyrants had. I did not know, and I actually had to go back and rewatch how many set points that the Pythons had when I was doing my recap. And eventually the Tyrants took the match 38-36 in that third set. That was probably the most excruciating third set I've seen. It was actually almost the longest third set in the NVA this season. It was the longest third set we'll be getting in the playoffs. Just going to throw that out there. But it was the second longest set in the NVA this season. The longest was still 39-37 between the Ramblers and the San Diego Wild in the regular season back in Event 2. But the Tyrants wound up sweeping the Pythons, as the Tyrants were led by Jake Langlois, who had 17 kills, 2 service aces, and 2 blocks, while Austin Matautia had 11 kills, Gianluca Grasso had 10 kills and 2 blocks. The Tyrants did not have Ryan Mather, as he was actually nursing an injury, and kudos to Mauro Grasso, who actually held him out as a precaution. So I think that was a good play on his part, just because in case you actually make it to the semifinals, you don't want to rush him back and make that injury worse, because you want to have him as healthy as possible. The Pythons were led by Jair Santiago, who had 18 kills and that 1 block, that super disrespectful block, which, man, talk about disrespectful. But other than Jair Santiago and his spectacular night, the Pythons didn't really get much, as they had Steven Morales and Giovanni Torres each having 7 kills. And the Pythons missed 20 serves, and they only had 1 ace. And they got outblocked 12-2, so the Pythons were on the worst end of the statistics sheet. And the Tyrants also only had 2... Actually, no, they had... No, that's correct. I was going to say the Tyrants only had 2 hitting errors, but the Tyrants had 7 hitting errors, and the Pythons only had 9 hitting errors. So at least the Pythons weren't too bad in terms of the hitting error department. So there was that. So now jumping over to the semifinals, we had the Texas Tyrants taking on the Orange County Stunners. So the first set was as good as advertised, as this first set could have gone either way. The Tyrants were leading at the media timeout, but then the Stunners earned the lead at one point, and they eventually took the first set as they ended the set on a 3-1 run, winning that first set 25-22, as the Stunners were led by Matt Hilling, who had 5 kills, while Grant Maroki had 3 kills. So this is the unique thing about the Stunners. The Stunners could have anybody leading the way through any match, and that's what's scary about them. Ryan Mather did play for the Tyrants, and he actually had 6 kills, and that's the crazy thing. Ryan Mather knew he needed to play in order for the Tyrants to have any sort of chance. So the second set, the Stunners really turned on the gas, and they really let the Tyrants have it, as the Stunners took that second set 25-16, as Hilling was leading the way with 9 kills. Corey Chavers had 8 kills following him. And then the Tyrants, they had Jake Langlois leading the way with 8 kills, while Ryan Mather had 7 kills. And honestly, this wasn't the Tyrants being bad. It was just the Stunners just putting so much pressure on them in terms of the service line. And here's the crazy thing for the Tyrants. They actually allowed 10 service aces through 2 sets. And that's kind of a recipe for disaster. When you're allowing 10 service aces and you have 0 through 2 sets, you are not going to be beating any sort of team in any match. So unfortunately for the Stunners, unfortunately for the Tyrants, the Stunners are going to basically get the better of you on any given day when they're putting up those numbers. And then the third set was basically the same, as the Stunners took that set 25-16. Tyrants did not register 1 ace, as the Stunners finished with 11, while both teams finished with 13 service errors. The Stunners also outblocked the Tyrants 10-4 as the Stunners were led by Corey Chavers, who had 12 kills, 3 service aces, while Matt Hilling had 10 kills and 3 blocks. Grant Maroki had 5 kills on 5 swings, so he hit a perfect 100%. The Tyrants were led by Ryan Mather, who had 12 kills, while Jake Langlois added 10 kills. Again, the Tyrants were on the worst end of the stat sheet, so unfortunately, the Tyrants just could not get anything going, and that's kind of how the Tyrants wound up laying a goose egg. And it sucks because I really expected this one to at least go 4, and Nick and I basically talked before this match, and I basically told him the Stunners were going to win this one, in at least 4. I want at least to go 4, maybe 5, but sadly, the Stunners basically flexed their muscle and punched the Tyrants straight up in the mouth. So the next semifinal we had was the Ramblers versus the Wild. So last week's show I made predictions, and this was kind of the toughest one to predict if both teams got that far. I basically said if the Wild had Matt Knigge and all their other guys, basically I would pick the Wild. If they didn't have Matt Knigge, because I said he was going to be training with the Canadian team. That's actually very false. He actually was training with the U.S. developmental team or something along those lines. He, as well as Jalen Penrose and a few other guys. They were training with some sort of U.S. training team or something along those lines. But either way, the Matt Knigge as well as Jalen Penrose were training with the U.S. We're training with USA Volleyball. I basically said if Matt Knigge is playing this weekend, and if he is playing against the Ramblers, then I am going to pick the Wild. I did find out that Matt Knigge was playing against the Ramblers, and that was the good news. The bad news is that they actually also found out that Brandon Rattray was questionable with a back injury. So, yeah, he kind of did a little too much for the Wild in that quarterfinal win against the Stingers. But eventually he did get treated, and he was a true game time decision, but Brandon Rattray did play against the Las Vegas Ramblers, and he knew he wanted to play in that one. I don't think a pack of dogs would keep him down, just because for Rattray and Knigge, that was their old team from last year. They knew that was important. So for the first set, it was basically good as advertised, as the Wild kind of took the early lead, and they eventually kind of pulled away as they were serving really tough. As both teams did miss 7 serves, but eventually the Wild capitalized on the Ramblers' mistakes, and they took that first set 25-19, as the Ramblers actually had 6 hitting errors, while the Wild actually did not have any, which is very surprising. As the Wild were led by Brandon Rattray's 6 kills, while Felix Chapman had 5 kills, Jalen Penrose had 4 kills, and for the Ramblers, it was kind of an uncharacteristic start to the match. I did not think that was going to happen to them. So then the second set, it was kind of more of the same, as the Wild got off to another fast start. Only this time, the Ramblers kind of responded to that fast start, but to their dismay, the Wild was able to finish them off, take the second set 25-21, and through 2 sets, the Ramblers did not have any blocks, and the Wild still did not have a hitting error, which is just mind-boggling. This was probably the best match the Wild had ever played, which was so amazing. And Brandon Rattray was basically Superman. He had 11 kills. He had half of the Wild's kills through 2 sets. This was Brandon Rattray's Superman match. Jalen Penrose had 12 kills for the Ramblers, while Felix Chapman had 8 kills. And the crazy thing for the Ramblers is that they had 0 service aces. That was probably their biggest problem. They had no aces through 2 sets. The Wild had no hitting errors through 2 sets. And honestly, for them, everything was just going incorrectly for the Ramblers, while everything was going correctly for the Wild. And then in the third set, it was kind of more of the same, as even though the Ramblers did get a service ace, and even though the Wild kind of did get a hitting error, or they did have a hitting error. I think that was kind of a mistake, because I want to say that Brandon Rattray did have a hitting error earlier, but maybe it just went out of play or something along those lines. Either way, regardless, the Wild did take set number 3, 25-19 in the match. So for the Wild, this was their biggest win of the season, as I basically put in my preview article that the Wild was good against not so great teams. They were actually undefeated against sub 500 teams, but against teams that had winning records before the playoffs started, they actually were a whopping 1-3. They're basically the Kirk Cousins of the NVA. Really bad against 500 or better teams, really good against sub 500 teams. So the same can be said for the Utah Stingers. And actually, I got a compliment from one of the Ramblers owner. He's saying that Teran actually had a really good statistic in his preview article. So I try to come up with these really good statistics and number nuggets. So I really do recommend checking out some of my preview articles, or any of my articles in general on the NVA website. Quick plug. Anyway, so for the Wild, they were led by Brandon Rattray, who had 18 kills. Again, he had over half of the Wild's kills, 18 kills. The Wild had 34 kills altogether. And the Wild's next kill leader was Sam Berge, who had 7 kills. And Rattray also had 2 service aces. That just goes to show how much of a man on a mission that Brandon Rattray was. I was just so impressed that Brandon Rattray had that big of a game. And he really wanted to be back in the final. He really wanted to put San Diego on his back. It was just so darn impressive. Matt Carnegie had 2 kills, 2 blocks, and 2 service aces. I wouldn't say he made the biggest splash, but I will say that he really made it tough for the Ramblers to run their game. And honestly, I will say this. I really thought he played... he wasn't the greatest impact player, but he really changed how the Ramblers ran their offense. And I really think it's tough when you play against a player like Matt Carnegie, just because he was last year's MVP, and he really wanted to play against his former team. And one of my buddies said that he's never seen a middle blocker like Matt Carnegie change the dynamic of a volleyball match. Just because Matt Carnegie has that like bow and arrow serve. Like, he has a float serve, but it can sometimes be like a sniper serve, which can really turn to be deadly. And he really blocks the ball well, and that swift kill in the middle can be so deadly if you're not ready for it. Then the Ramblers were led by Jalen Penrose, who had 14 kills. Felix Chapman had 9 kills. All in all, for the Ramblers, they didn't play bad. I mean, obviously, the 19 service errors really hurt them. Only 1 service ace. They did not put a whole lot of pressure on the Wild's offense. They only had 2 blocks on the night, though the Wild had 5 blocks on the night. It was just basically offense all around, but for the Ramblers, they just made way too many mistakes. And sadly for them, they just could not pull out the W, and they just kind of I wouldn't say they folded, but they just kind of crumbled. And sadly, they did not have Colton Cowell, which I don't know the whereabouts of him, and that's kind of a personal issue. So unfortunately, I cannot really explain why Colton Cowell did not play. So sadly, I can't really explain why he did not play. So the third place match was between the Ramblers and the Tyrants, and I actually did not make a prediction for the third place match. I'm not really a third place prediction guy, just because when it comes to third place matches, it's all about who actually cares more and who actually wants to try hard and who is not more deflated. So anyway, for the Ramblers and the Tyrants, here's the thing. The Ramblers, ever since 2020, when the NBA playoffs got expanded, they've always have meddled. For For the Tyrants, they had their best team, but sadly, they just could not get to the gold medal match. So they have the pride of finishing strong. For the Tyrants, they took the first set 25-20. And one more thing to mention in that Ramblers lost to the Wild, that was actually the first time they were swept by an opponent since getting swept by the Orange County Stunners back in the 2021 NVA Finals. As It's Drewski, the host of Heart of Texas Sports, pops into the chat room. He says, "Sorry I'm late, but I'm in the party. Finish it strong, Teran." Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. But back to Tyrants Ramblers. So Miguel Monterola actually alluded this in the post-game press conference on the NVA YouTube channel. He said that this is actually the first time his team has gotten swept in a while, ever since the NVA Finals back a couple of years ago. So for his team, it was going to be really tough to regroup after getting swept. So it really showed in that first set that the Tyrants really want to punch him in the mouth, as Jake Langlois led the way with 6 kills through that first set. Ryan Mather had 5 kills. Believe it or not, this was Ryan Mather's first match against the Las Vegas Ramblers, against his former team, mind you. And also, Tanner Maxwell was facing off against his former team, the Las Vegas Ramblers. And then also, Antoine Aguilar also faced off against his former team, the Las Vegas Ramblers, too. So, kind of a little bit of a fun fact nugget right there. Jalen Penrose was leading the way for the Ramblers with 4 kills. Believe it or not, the Tyrants had 16 kills in that first set, while the Ramblers only had 10. So, it's kind of an interesting offense right there, or interesting differences in offense. Then in the second set, it looked like the Tyrants were going to go up 2-0, as the Tyrants were doing everything in their power to make sure that the Ramblers were not running an effective offense. But then the Ramblers were serving really tough, and that's one thing that the Tyrants kind of lacked in that second set. Their serve receive was kind of slipping up, as Jalen Penrose was serving tough. Felix Chapman was really serving up a storm. He actually did not have a serving error through 2 sets, and he had 3 service aces, as the Ramblers actually took that second set 25-21. And here's the thing for the Ramblers. It was between Eric Beatty and Colton Cowell, and honestly, I think maybe Eric Beatty could have been the answer. And I feel this is no knock on Miguel Monterola. He's a fantastic coach, and he's done a fantastic job. But I will say, if he had gone to Eric Beatty earlier in that first match against the Wild in the semifinals, maybe, hence the word maybe, there might have been a shot for the Ramblers to make the final. But I'm not the coach, and that's not my call. So then the third set, the Tyrants got up off the mat, and they basically let the Ramblers have it, as they eventually took that third set 25-20, as, once again, it was the Ryan Mather show. He had 16 kills, only 1 hitting error, and he had 2 blocks. Jake Langlois also had 11 kills, 1 block, 2 service aces. In that match, if you saw the third place match, you saw that Jake Langlois was actually jump serving instead of float serving. So that was big for the Tyrants right there, as he was applying a lot of serving pressure. Jalen Penrose had 15 kills to go along with 2 service aces. Felix Chapman had 4 service aces to go along with 8 kills. And then the fourth set, the Tyrants were really socking it to the Ramblers. They actually were up by as many as 11, as it was just so amazing. It was just so impressive to see the Tyrants just really coming alive. And this was the true Texas Tyrants that I think everyone was just informing me about. And even Gianluca Grasso was pretty much saying, this is our best Texas Tyrants team in quite a while, as the Tyrants beat the Ramblers in set 4, 25-17, taking the match and finishing third in the NVA Cup, as this is their second straight bronze, as they finished in the top 3 for the second straight year. And for the first time since the playoff format got expanded, the Ramblers did not podium, which is very surprising. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes dynasties go through a little bit of a lull. But whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And now that the Ramblers probably have this fire under them, they'll probably go undefeated, and they'll probably just dominate their way next year. Anyway, the Tyrants were led by Ryan Mather, who had 20 kills. Jake Langlois added 14 kills, 2 service aces. They also got 4 service aces from Austin Matautia. The Ramblers were led by Jalen Penrose, who had 19 kills, 2 service aces. Felix Chapman had 10 kills to go along with 4 service aces with no serving errors, which is pretty good. And Eric Beatty chipped in 6 kills. So that's pretty much that for that third place match. And now for the final. So in that first set, it was basically like a boxing match. Well, early on, the Wild actually got the early jump on him. They actually led 4-0 as they gave up the first point, but they went on a 4-0 run, and it looked like the Wild kind of was ready to go after that first point. But this is the Stunners we're talking about. Their Stunners are not going to let an early 4-0 run define them, as they basically rebounded from that, and honestly, even though they fell behind 21-19, they responded with 2 straight points of their own, and it was tied 22-22, but the Stunners responded with 3 straight points as Spencer Olivier scored to make it 23-22, and then Corey Chavers scored the last 2 points via kill, as that was basically the first set, 25-22 in favor of the Stunners. Then in the second set, it was basically a little bit of a flip-flop. It was basically, I wouldn't say it was a blowout, but I think this was more so of the Stunners showing their true potential, as they were just serving a whole lot more tougher than the first set. I think that the Stunners were basically, I wouldn't say they were rusty, but I will say that they were just making better plays. They were making big-time swings. And their players, I think they had more options. To the Wild's credit, they had Brandon Rattray making big play after big play. But here's the problem. The Wild, through 2 sets, were led by Brandon Rattray, who had 14 kills. But their next kill leader had 3 kills. And they actually had 3 players with 3 kills. You need to have that Robin to your Batman. For the Stunners, they had Corey Chavers with 8 kills, Matt Hilling and Spencer Olivier with 6 kills apiece. They had a 3-headed monster. Nick West had 3 kills. I'm not knocking it, but honestly, the Wild can't just lean on one guy. I mean, obviously they had a little bit of variety, but it was just Brandon Rattray. But I digress. And they actually did have a majority of their roster. So, honestly, for the Wild, I will say this. I really do admire that Brandon Rattray was really doing everything in his power to try and wheel his team to victory. But I feel his team could have probably helped him out a little bit more. I mean, I will also say this. They have some other options. They have Uchenna Afoa, Sam Berge, Owen Carlenzig. I didn't even know what an Owen Carlenzig was before today. They had Matt Carnegie, even Chris Schaefer came on off the bench, which was very surprising. So there was that right there. And then in the third set, the Stunners kind of got off to an early fast start, and then they didn't really look back. They didn't trail in this set, and honestly, even though the Wild didn't really get blown out, the Stunners didn't really pull away, but they just weren't in any danger, as they just continued to apply the pressure. They just sided out really well, which was something that Matt Hilling really explained well to me. They served tough, they blocked really well, they swung the ball really nicely, and honestly, that was basically how the Stunners wound up winning, as they actually closed the match out in fitting fashion off of a block, and as Ira Thor basically put it, reach out and stuff someone! As the Stunners took that third set 25-19 and say goodnight everybody, as the Stunners are the 2023 NVA champion. Corey Chavers was the MVP of the whole tournament. Spencer Olivier, as well as Nick West, made the all-tournament team. And a few others made the all-tournament team as well. I'm not going to get too much into that. I already tweeted that out already, so I don't need to go into that. But I actually want to go into my own regular season NVA awards. And this is my own personal regular season NVA awards. This isn't affiliated with the NVA and whatnot, so please don't affiliate me with the NVA, or please don't say that I'm giving out my own awards and whatnot, or whatnot. This is just for fun. So, my NVA regular season awards. So, my MVP, this is obviously a no-brainer. And MVP goes to Jair Santiago of the Puerto Rico Pythons. Why? Because the dude was on a team that started 0-5. The dude was practically having to carry this team match in and match out. And he needed to come up big. And there were times where the Pythons just did not have the full roster. And there were times where Santiago had to basically put the team on his back. And like I said, they went 0-5, and then their last 5 matches, they went 4-1. They even beat the Stunners, which eventually were the NVA champion. And this dude led the NVA at the end of the regular season in points and in kills. This dude, he's, like I said, he is on my Mount Rushmore of NVA players, along with Felix Chapman, Joe Norman, and Nick West. This dude is my regular season MVP, if I had to basically have that, or if I were commissioner, or if there was a regular season MVP. So, that's my MVP right there. My newcomer of the year, oh my god, you can really give this award to a whole lot of players. And it's not just in any position. You can give this to a libero, a setter, an opposite, an outside hitter, a middle. You can give it basically to anybody. But I'm giving this award to Spencer Olivier. Now, you're probably wondering why. And you're probably thinking, oh my god, you gave it to him just because you see him at Long Beach State. Wow. Or you gave it to him because he was on the championship team. Well, remember, regular season. And for starters, Spencer Olivier was an all-star. Second of all, the dude hasn't even been fully 1 year removed from college. Third, the dude made a tremendous impact after he basically came from Long Beach State, after he graduated from Long Beach State. And fourth, he helped lead his team to the playoffs and the number 2 seed, and eventually to the NVA Championship. So, I think Spencer Olivier is newcomer of the year. Now, you could also make an argument for maybe Jalen Penrose, or Hui Ding, his Spencer Olivier's teammate, or maybe Jared Ray of the New Jersey Freedom, who I think is definitely was probably under the radar in my opinion. I didn't even know what a Jared Ray was until I saw this guy. But to me, I think Spencer Olivier deserves newcomer of the year. So, and he didn't even play in event 1 and event 2. And then when he was thrown into the second match of event number 3, the dude was making a tremendous impact. And then you can maybe also make a case for other newcomers of the year in terms of the regular season. But I think Spencer Olivier definitely deserves newcomer of the year. So, honestly, that's kind of the reason why I picked Spencer Olivier for newcomer of the year. Just because the dude hadn't even been a full year removed from college, and the dude was making a tremendous impact for the Orange County Stunners. And now for Coach of the Year. This one is very tough just because some coaches, unfortunately, could not be present just because of second jobs and whatnot. I kind of had trouble. This basically boiled down to Matt Prosser, Matt Prosser of the Orange County Stunners, Nick England of the of the of the San Diego Wild. What's his face? Russell Holmes of the Utah Stingers and Miguel Monterola of the Las Vegas Ramblers. I want to put Mauro Grosso of the Texas Tyrants as Coach of the Year, but there's one problem. Unfortunately, he wasn't really present at more of these events. So, unfortunately, I couldn't really give him Coach of the Year. And I feel bad for him. But if I had to give him, like, co-coach of the year or, like, maybe, like, semi-coach of the year, I'd maybe give it to him because his son, Gian, who is a player coach, he kind of filled in. But I gave Coach of the Year to Nick England just because he probably put out, even though it doesn't really show in the regular season record, 7-3, majority of those wins were against sub 500 teams. The dude was basically the GM, it was basically a new team which wound up winning the division, and they were oh so close to clinching the number 1 seed in the American Conference. It eventually wound up working out for them just because they wound up making it to the finals. But new team wound up winning the division, or at least tying for the division title with the Utah Stingers. So that's kind of the reason why I gave Nick England Coach of the Year. I mean, I guess I could have also given Coach of the Year to Matt Prosser, even though his team was second in the American Conference. I could have also given Coach of the Year to Miguel Monterola, but that was extremely obvious to give him Coach of the Year just because his team finished 9-1 last year, and then eventually they finished 8-2 this year, which, do you really want to give him a Coach of the Year after an 8-2 season? That's kind of the reason why I gave it to Nick England. I mean, new team, and then they went 7-3, and they won the division. I mean, they still had the tiebreaker over the Stingers, so yeah. That's kind of the reason why I gave Nick England Coach of the Year. That's just me, though. Now, Middle Blocker of the Year, okay, I had a little bit of a tough time of making the case of Middle Blocker of the Year. I don't know who was Middle Blocker of the Year. I actually could not think of a Middle Blocker of the Year. I was either it's probably, if I had to pick, it'd probably be Matt Seifert of the New Jersey Freedom. Probably because he was the most present. If I had to pick in terms of most present, it would probably be Matt Seifert of the New Jersey Freedom. Maybe Kevin Vaz. But I think Matt Seifert really impacted the game well. It's really tough just because middle blockers, and this is no disrespect to middle blockers, there's only one middle blocker that I thought really impacts the NVA a whole lot, and that is Matt Knigge. But he wasn't really at all of the events. He wasn't at events 1 and 2. He wasn't really at he wasn't really present a majority of the season. So unfortunately, I can't really say that he was involved the entire season. So I can't really give him my middle blocker of the year. So sadly, I can't give him middle blocker of the year. So I kind of am at a crossroads of giving him middle blocker of the year. So, and I don't want to give it to Grant Maroki just because he put up good numbers, but they weren't really the greatest. I guess if I have to give middle blocker of the year, it'd probably be Nick West. Just because the dude serves really good. Like, his serve is just so fast. It's like boom, 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 boom. And if you're not ready for it, it's going to be an ace 99% of the time. And it's basically going to turn a 1, 2, 3 point lead into like a 6, 7, 8 point lead. And Nick West, as Matt Prosser basically said, he changes the game even though he doesn't put up like big kill numbers. And the dude is basically straight up phenomenal. So I guess if I have to give middle blocker of the year, I'd give it to like Matt Seifert of the Freedom and Nick West. I didn't really think of middle blocker of the year all that much, just because that was probably the toughest one. But if I had to give out middle blocker of the year, I'd probably say Seifert or Nick West. If I didn't have to look at numbers and I had to look at film, I'd probably say, if I was looking at numbers, I'd probably say Seifert. If I was looking at film, I'd probably say Nick West. But I'd probably split those two. It'd probably be a tie between those two players. And then libero of the year, again, this is probably, if I had to look at film, I'd maybe say Hui Ding of the Stunners. If I had to look at numbers, I'd probably say Matt Primrose of the Florida Southern Exposure. I kind of have to give the edge to Matt Primrose of the Florida Southern Exposure. Now, this is no disrespect to Ding of the Stunners. I think Hui Ding does an amazing job, and I feel so horrible for not basically talking about him more often in my interviews and for not talking about him a whole lot on the podcast. But I think Hui Ding is basically that quiet guy. And Matt Prosser said it best. He's that silent assassin that his play does more of the talking. And honestly, the dude just lets his gameplay do the talking, and he's earned the libero spot, and now he's an NVA champion. But for Matt Primrose, the dude was on a exposure team who, no offense to them, they didn't really have their full roster, and it was basically a merry-go-round of players, and they were facing really tough guys, like the Stunners. They also faced a Freedom team, which they actually beat. They also faced the Ramblers twice. That's a really good team. They faced an improved Matadors team, which unfortunately they lost to on the last match of the season. They've also lost to the Stingers, which also a really good team. So all in all they also lost to the Wild as well. So for Primrose, he had to face a lot of pin hitters who were basically just smashing that ball at like maybe 70, 80 miles per hour. And the dude was basically like, had to basically suck up those hits. So, and the dude, excuse me. Sorry. But the dude was basically sucking up hits and was basically doing everything he can to maybe keep his team in the game. So, all in all, for Matt Primrose and the Florida Southern Exposure, they played a lot of stiff competition, and the dude led the team in digs this year. So, I can't really go against him. Again, this was probably the year of the libero. Like, the entire NVA was stacked in terms of liberos. So, all in all, for libero of the year, I'd probably give it to Matt Primrose, but it's so close. Like, there are so many good liberos in the NVA. You've got Matt Primrose, you've got Hui Ding of the Stunners, you've got Ryan Manukian of the Ramblers, you've got Jose Malero of the Texas Tyrants, or as Adam Carnett calls him, the guy in the luchador mask. You've got, I'm blanking on, you've got JJ Rosa of the Utah Stingers. I feel there's more, and I'm just blanking on them. So the list goes on, and I'm probably blanking on more libero names that I just can't think of. But all in all, this was probably the year of the libero, and for the Wild, their libero was pretty good as well. Josh Eisenberg, he was pretty. I didn't even know who Josh Eisenberg was until the PA announcer said his name, and I'm like, oh, that's who the Wild's libero was. Pretty good. So, all in all, I think the liberos in the NVA are fairly underrated, and I think they're going to get better as time goes on. And who knows, maybe we're going to have more liberos. So, that is pretty much my NVA regular season awards and my awards altogether, and that's basically that for the NVA season in 2023. I will say this about the final. It does suck that it had to go 3. I wish it could have gone 4. That's the 3rd straight year we've seen a final get decided in 3 sets as opposed to like maybe 4 or 5. I really want to see a final get decided in 5 sets, but it is what it is, so we'll see what happens in the up and coming years. Maybe we will see a match go 5 sets. And I will also say this. There was not one match that went 5 sets. There was not one match that went the distance, which really broke my heart. But now I know how MPSF bias feels. I'm kidding. I do want to give a late birthday shout out to Jonathan Bates, a.k.a. MPSF bias of Off the Block. So I hope you had a great birthday and whatnot. So on that note, that's going to basically do it for the NVA, and I already missed the NVA, but there may be more NVA content on the way, as I might be doing more articles, and I did hear that there might be some NVA exhibition matches, but we'll see. But on that note, that's going to do it for the NVA portion of this show. When we come back, we will be discussing some AVP, some FIVB, and some Big Ten volleyball. So keep it locked here. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide through your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well, and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely do check out all of our amazing shows, such as The Defining Moment with Larry B, Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson, which will be on tomorrow, probably back at its regular time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern, and Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick, which goes on at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central Time. As a side note, I do want to mention that next week's Set Point will most likely be going on Monday, but it'll probably be going on like maybe 6:30 unless stated otherwise. Maybe 7 most likely, possibly. Time will tell. It is because of, unfortunately, work, but unfortunately, it is out of my control, and I don't really want to move the time to like earlier in the day. And sadly, I can't have it in at noon. So it's either I have it 30 minutes back, or maybe an hour back, or I'm gonna have to move it to another day, which I don't want to do. But regardless, we will figure it out, and we will have Set Point, and we will overcome this. Anyway, so segment number 2 of Set Point is underway. Alright, so basically, we have a lot more volleyball to cover. Yes, that was only segment number 1. The NBA was only segment number 1. Segment number 2, actually, is the Challenger Cup. So you're probably wondering, well, what's so special about the Challenger Cup? So the Challenger Cup is kind of like the NIT tournament, or the NIVC. Basically, if you win the Challenger Cup, you qualify for the VNL next season, and you also, I think, qualify for the Olympics in the next year as well. So, in terms of the women's and men's Challenger Cup, the winner of both of them, basically, you get to qualify for the VNL next year, and then since next year is the Olympics, you also get to qualify for the Olympics as well. So, in the Challenger Cup on the women's side, the winner of that was... Can we get a drum roll, please? It's probably a bad drum roll. By the way, if you haven't really noticed, I actually got a new mic. So, it's actually a Blue Snowball mic. So, if you haven't noticed by now, and if I sound a little different, hopefully for the better, I have a new microphone, so hopefully I don't sound overly bad, and hopefully I don't sound too loud. So there's that right there. But the winner from the Challenger Cup on the women's side was France. So France on the women's side defeated Vietnam in the quarterfinals, Ukraine in the semifinals, and Sweden in the finals. So France, believe it or not, they are actually the host of the 2024 Olympics, as everything will be hosted in Paris. So on the men's side, the winner of the Challenge Cup, or the Challenger Cup on the men's side is... It's not really the best drum roll, but what can you do? Turkey. So Turkey, on the men's side of the Challenger Cup, defeated the Dominican Republic in the quarterfinals, Ukraine in the semifinals, and Qatar in the final. So good job to Turkey, as it was a great FIVB in terms of Turkey for both the men's and women's. The women's volleyball team managed to win the VNL, while the men's managed to win the Challenger Cup, and they now qualify for the VNL next year, and they also qualify for the Olympics. So good job to both teams, as both Challenger Cups champions will now be in the VNL next year, and they'll also be in the Olympics. So great job to both teams. I unfortunately could not really follow too much about that this past weekend, just because the NVA was obviously happening and whatnot. But I did want to make note of that, just because the Challenger Cup is FIVB volleyball, and it's basically important volleyball, just because the VNL is a summer event, and it's basically important volleyball, and we love the VNL. Especially since I might be seeing the VNL in my own backyard next year, in terms of the men's or women's. But I digress. And it's important just because the Olympics are next season, so you can't really disregard any of the Challenger Cup. I know many might say this is like the FI or the NIVC, but it's not really, just because this can impact the Olympics and whatnot, and it impacts next year's VNL. So it unfortunately does not. It actually does impact. It is actually, the Challenger Cup is important volleyball. So there's that right there. All right, so that is that for the FIVB Challenger Cup. So there's that. All right, so next up we have some AVP, as this week we have a tournament happening, which is awesome stuff. So this week the AVP will be traveling to the ATL, the land of Ludacris, Lil Jon, and all the other rappers I could probably think of, as they will be traveling to Atlanta for the first Gold Series tournament, as they'll be traveling to Atlanta for the first tournament of the Gold Series, which I think is really cool. And that's probably where all the points are and all of the bragging rights are in terms of everything happening in terms of the playoffs and whatnot, which I think is awesome. And I'm really going to try to keep tabs of this. Unfortunately, I work Sunday, but I'll be off at 1, so I'm sure I'll be able to basically, keep some sort of watchful eye on this. But here's the event details. The AVP's Gold Series 2023 kicks off in Atlanta from August 4th through the 6th, in the city that brought beach volleyball to the Olympics back in 1996. I didn't know that, actually. Since then, this peach of a city has become a host of our marquee Gold Series. Expect intense competition, including night sessions under the lights, and AVP pros bringing the heat to earn the first Gold Series hardware of 2023. Hosted in Atlantic Station Stadium, complete with world-class dining, shopping, unforgettable hospitality, that love at ATL heart vibe. I like how they put heart emojis in this. But what if you're reading this off of a desktop? Not that I'm doing that, of course. Alright, so here's the schedule. So Friday, August 4th, is the first and second rounds of the winners and contenders bracket. And then 10 a.m. is the first matches. 12:30 to 1 p.m. is the Atlanta Pro Volleyball special announcement. Then 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. is the high school and club activities. Then the 9 p.m. are the last matches. Then Saturday, August 5th, is the elimination and winners semifinals, with the noon matches being the first matches. Then noon is also the athlete meet and greet in the AVP shop. 1:30 p.m. through 3 p.m. is the education stations. 3 p.m. is the athlete meet and greet in Club AVP. Then Sunday, August 5th, is Championship Sunday. Well, wait, that's actually a mistake. Sunday, August 6th. That's actually a mistake on the AVP's part. They put August 5th when it should be August 6th. Gosh dang it, AVP. You're dropping the ball. No pun intended. Anyway, so Sunday, August 5th, or Sunday, August 6th, is Championship Sunday. It's the semifinals and finals. 9:30 a.m. is the first matches, then noon is the women's final match, and then 1:30 p.m. is the men's final match. So, if it's going to be 12 p.m., if it's going to be noon in Atlanta, that's going to be 9 a.m. here, and then, oh man. So I'm not going to be able to watch unless, of course, yeah, that's just nice. And that's the bad news. The good news is that the broadcast, it's actually going to be broadcasted on ESPN2. So there is that right there. And I'm not going to read all the details just because I don't want to bore you, because I'm not Mother Goose and whatnot. Anyway, so now let's go to the entry list. Let's go to the men's and women's entry list. So we'll start with the women. So your top 4 seeds are as follows. I'm trying to sound like Mark Schuerman, but I am completely failing. So your top seed is Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang. Your number 2 seed, Taryn Cloth and Kristen Nuss. Your number 3 seed, Therese Cannon and Sarah Sponsel. And your 4 seed, Julia Scholes and Betsy Flint. By the way, Julia Scholes and Betsy Flint had themselves an eventful weekend last weekend in a beach volleyball tournament, as they actually managed to pull off quite the quarterfinal upset against the number 1 pair in the nation. I think her name is Anna Patricia, and I think it's like Eduarda or Duda, as she called. I forget her last name, but it was just a crazy quarterfinal where I think they were down 12-5, and then they were 12-5 in set 3, and then they were down 14-9 at one point in set 3, and then Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes wound up winning that 5th set 17-15, and it was just bonkers. Unfortunately for Scholes and Flint, they wound up finishing second in the entire tournament, but winning that tournament over the number 2 seed, or number 1 overall seed, was just straight up amazing. I kind of wanted to share that right there just because I saw Julia Scholes' name and Betsy Flint's name, and I just think that was just amazing. I have to give them a shout out. Anyway, so the remainder of the automatic qualifiers, or the pairs that are in the main draws, are Brandy Wilkerson and Melissa Humana Paredes, Kelly Kalinsky and Haley Harward, Megan Kraft and Emily Stockman, Deanna Kraft and Zana Muno, Sarah Pavin and Gina Urongo, Lily Maestrini and Larissa Maestrini, Corinne Quiggle and Sarah Schermerhorn, and rounding off the main draw pairs are Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton. Everyone else is basically playing in the qualifier, which is the day before. So there are 4 pairs in the qualifiers, and that just so happens to be Tony Rodriguez and Savvy Simo, Carly Skogit and Jaden Whitmarsh, Jolani Hodel and Kaylee York, and Katie Dickens and Jen Ketty. So if my math serves me correct, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm guessing, well, that's 12 pairs right there altogether. So how are they going to have one pair face one another? Like, that just seems weird. So how are they going to have, like, is it just, that's weird. So they have 12 main draw participants, and then they have four being in the qualifiers, courtesy of the Denver Tour Series. Okay. I'm no AVP. I'm not the biggest AVP expert, but I don't know how they're going to implement that. But, oh well. Anyway, so they haven't released the bracket, which makes me sad face. So I can't really basically gauge on how they're going to basically go through the qualifiers, and whoever wins gets to face whichever seed. I imagine whoever wins the qualifier gets to face the top seed in Sarah Hughes and Kelly Cheng, but I digress. Anyway, on the men's side, your top 4 seeds in the main draw on the men's side is number 1 seed, Miles Partain and Andy Benish. 2 seed, Kame Schulk and Triborn. 3 seed, Trevor Crabb and Theo Brunner. And the 4 seed, Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander, or as I call them, Team Taylor. The following pairs are also in the main draw, and they don't have to partake in the qualifier. Miles Evans and Chase Budinger, Evan Corey and Troy Field, Tim Brewster and Kyle Friend, Paul Lottman and Tim Baumgren, Avery Drost, friend of the show, set point, and Phil Dalhouser, Chase Frischman and Dave Palm, Hagen Smith and Logan Weber, and rounding off the main draw pairs, Jake Dydrich and Cody Caldwell. So that's all of your main draw pairs. And basically, your qualifier from the Denver Tour Series, who basically have to play, I think, the day before, are Billy Allen and Allison Cerruti, Michael Grossell and Nathan Yang, Lars Basie and Gage Basie, and Bill Kalinsky and John Hayden. So that's basically all of your participants in the AVP Atlanta Gold Series. So that's basically that. Unfortunately, there is no bracket for me to preview, and sadly, I can't go on further than that. So that's that for the AVP portion of this show. So we have only one more segment to go, and then I will let you all go on your way. And that is the Big Ten volleyball coaches preseason coaches poll. So this was released on Friday, and honestly, I'm glad we got some NCAA women's volleyball preseason coaches polls, and it gives me something more to talk about as the NCAA women's volleyball season gets closer and closer by the day. So when I saw these coaches polls, it kind of gave me some incentive of what's going to be happening. So the preseason coaches poll was released on Friday, and I actually was informed of this by by the host of our Wisconsin show, Bernie Bango. He airs every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. or 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. There we go. And he actually joked, ready to see the Badgers win another natty and another volleyball natty. And I said, well, it's doable. And I was wondering, well, why would he randomly say that? And then I was like, oh, wait, the volleyball preseason coaches poll in the Big Ten. So in terms of the Big Ten volleyball preseason coaches poll, or the preseason poll, let's go down from 14 to 10. 14 in terms of being slated to finish. We have Rutgers at 14, Iowa at 13, Michigan State at 12, and tied for 10th is Northwestern and Michigan. 9th through 6th consists of Maryland at 9, Indiana at 8, Illinois at 7, and Ohio State at 6. 5 through 1 consist of Purdue at 5, Penn State at 4, Minnesota at 3, Nebraska at 2, and the one that is slated to finish atop the Big Ten women's volleyball standings is... Can't really hear it, but I kind of had a drum roll. Wisconsin. So, there you go. Wisconsin is slated to finish atop the Big Ten. So that's kind of not surprising just because I think Wisconsin has been really improving steadily in terms of the Big Ten, and I think they're going to do really good. So I actually got this reply from somebody, and he actually gives me his takes on the Big Ten in terms of volleyball. So he says Nebraska beats Wisconsin this year. He says UNL beats W this year. I guess he doesn't want to put the entire... He doesn't want to put the entire initials or the entire team there just because of character limit, but I digress. He puts Nebraska beats Wisconsin this year, mini stumbles, mini referring to Minnesota, PSU or Penn State rises, Iowa has its best season, MSU or Michigan State rises, OSU or Ohio State rebuilds, Illinois or Illinois or Illini finally makes it to the top 5. Mich or Michigan falls further, and then NW or Northwestern races Rutgers for the bottom. All right, I'm going to break down that reply in every single part. He starts off by saying Nebraska beats Wisconsin this year. All right, I don't disagree with that, but I'm also going to say this. Oh, by the way, his Twitter name is Robert Evans93. He's clearly a Nebraska fan, for starters. Okay, I will just say this. Nebraska volleyball fans, I'm not going to knock Nebraska volleyball fans because they're passionate, and I will just say this. Y'all are passionate people, and I have no problem with y'all. But, and I do not disagree with anything y'all say. But here's the thing. Nebraska beats Wisconsin this year. My problem with that is this. Wisconsin has kind of gotten the better of Nebraska the past, 9 tries? And it's not just in the Big Ten. It's kind of in the NCAA tournament as well. Hence the national championship from 2 seasons ago. So here's my thing. I think it's doable, but I don't want to say that it can ultimately be done. I think it can be done. I think Nebraska definitely has the talent, but Wisconsin just continues to improve and improve, even though they keep getting hit hard in terms of graduation, and they keep getting hit in terms of the transfer portal. So all in all, for Wisconsin and Nebraska, that's kind of a question mark. I think it's possible they can maybe win. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's possible. So I think it's a 50-50 possibility. Then he says many stumbles. Now Minnesota, I think they're going to be good. I don't think they will stumble. They returned Taylor Landfair. And while they did get hit hard in terms of the transfer portal, losing Booth to the transfer portal, didn't they get Kylie Murph from Ohio State? So, and also they got Keegan Cook as their new head coach. So I don't think they're going anywhere. I just don't see them finishing outside of the top 5. So it depends on how he uses the word stumbles. I think Minnesota's a top 5 team. Now, if he says stumbles as in they stumbled 2 spots, then maybe I agree with that. But I just don't see them stumbling out of the top 5. Especially with Taylor Landfair. So, I don't think they're stumbling. Then he says Penn State rises. That I 100% agree with. Matter of fact, I would put Penn State higher than Minnesota. I think Penn State is number 3. I will go on the record and say Penn State finishes higher than Minnesota. Because they, I think, got much better. I think they might have gotten the most better of all the teams in the Big Ten Conference. I think that they probably have the biggest ceiling of all of the teams in the Big Ten. Their only Achilles heel is Nebraska. Nebraska has always gotten the better of them. I don't even remember I think it was 2015 the last time Penn State beat Nebraska. But Nebraska has always gotten the better of Penn State, and that seems to kind of been the thing that has been tripping them up. So I will say this about Katie Schumacher-Colley's team. She has done an excellent job, and this is only year 2 for them. So I really think that the Nittany Lions are going to be really good this season. And with Mac Pedraza and Jess Merzick, just a couple of the players that they just got through the transfer portal, I think Penn State can really make a huge splash. I would not be surprised if Penn State really had a deep NCAA tournament run. And then he also goes on and says, Iowa has its best season. Okay, I'm not going to really disrespect Iowa. I've never really known Iowa to have the greatest Big Ten volleyball team, because here's the thing. When you mention Big Ten volleyball, the first words that come to mind are Wisconsin, Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue, Minnesota. I don't know if Iowa is really the first word that comes to mind, but maybe Iowa has a good season. He didn't really go into detail of best season. Now, maybe he's referring to best season, but they fall short of the postseason. But maybe they have their best season and then they make the NIVC. I need more detail on best season. Like, I don't know. But who knows? Maybe Iowa actually has some success. Because I haven't seen their name in terms of getting transfers. But who knows? Maybe. Like, go for the gusto, Iowa. Then he goes on and says Michigan State rises. All right, I really want Michigan State to have success, especially if it means that my buddy Zach Puplis, the host of Lions, Tigers, Pistons, and Wings, oh my, will be talking about this. But Michigan State is in such a packed conference. And also I want to see Nalani Yosia have success, just because I did see her play back at Redondo Union High School, and Tommy Chaffins is my buddy. He coached her in high school, by the way. But back to Michigan State. I really want to see Michigan State being competitive, because I remember Michigan State being somewhat competitive back in the old days. But I really would like to see Michigan State seeing some sort of competitiveness. But the problem is they just play in such a stacked conference. And they're chosen to finish 12th in the conference. So can they really withstand the likes of, like, Illinois? And he says they rise. Maybe they could rise from being 12th? Like, he's a little vague with some of these predictions. Like, maybe he says rises, but he doesn't mean, like, they rise from 12th. I don't know. Anyway, next up he says Ohio State rebuilds. Okay, this is the one I 100% agree with. I love Jen Flynn Oldenburg as a head coach. She's done an outstanding job. However, this is probably going to be the most challenging year that she's had, just because all the players that she's had from last year's team that made the Elite Eight, and then the previous years where she's had lots of success, they have pretty much left the team because of graduation or the transfer portal and all that sort of jazz. She's basically having to start from scratch. So, unfortunately, this is going to be a very tough season for Ohio State. But the fact of the matter is that they are slated to finish 6th. The fact that they are picked to finish 6th is actually quite generous. I actually would have had them down a little bit lower, but a little bit later on that. And that's actually a perfect segue to go into what he says next. Illini finally makes it into the top 5. So that's perfect segue to go into Illinois. I actually would pick Illinois to finish higher than Ohio State. I actually would put Illinois ahead of Ohio State. I would put Illinois at 6, Ohio State at 7. No disrespect to Ohio State, but I think Illinois might have a little bit more firepower this year. As for them finishing in the top 5, if Purdue did not have a team, and if Purdue didn't have Ava Hudson, I would totally agree with that. The problem is that Ava Hudson is still on that Purdue team. Raven Colvin is still on that Purdue team. Dave Shondell is still coaching that Purdue team. And then you still have 4 other really good coaches in Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Penn State. So, unfortunately, I can't really put Chris Thomas's Illini in that top 5 just yet. I really want to, but it's so tough. Illinois is probably on the outside looking in. They're the first team out of that top 5. But I actually do not disagree with him too much. I think they're so close to being a top 5 team in that Big Ten conference. But I will also just say, no. I think they're a top 6 team, being number 6. And then Robert Evans goes on to say that Michigan falls further. All right, now this is something I have to sadly agree on. First of all, I love Erin Virtue. I like her. Well, I just said I love her. Now I like her. First of all, Erin Virtue. Erin Virtue is a fantastic coach, and I think she's the perfect fit for Michigan. I like her. I think the players are respectable. My problem is this. I don't really like what happened with Mark Rosen. If you all remember episode 200 of Set Point and me having Mark Rosen on the show, he said he didn't like what happened. He doesn't like where the program is going. And unfortunately, if you all remember what happened with Mark Rosen, he kind of got dismissed. Basically, they moved in a different direction from Mark Rosen. And it's sad of what happened, because Mark Rosen poured 20-plus years into that Michigan program. And for the athletic director to say, pack your things, you're gone, it's really sad. And I understand Mark Rosen had health issues, but honestly, the dude basically poured his heart and soul, and he's the all-time winningest coach at Michigan. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect Michigan, but the fact that he was given his walking papers is very disappointing. Now, if Mark Rosen basically had quit on his own terms, then it would have been a different story. But honestly, the fact that Mark Rosen even said that he doesn't like where the program is heading, even with Aaron Virtue, I am very concerned for Michigan. I kind of think that Michigan falls further as well, and I hate to agree with what Robert Evans says, but I totally agree with him. And I don't want to say that about the players and Aaron Virtue, but I feel they're in a stacked conference. They are playing some stiff competition, and it's going to be a climb for them. Like, finishing 10th or tied for 10th is very generous. Do I think they could have success? Maybe. They can only go up from here unless they're going down. So, we'll see. Before I get into the last one, he didn't really make note of Indiana, Maryland, or Purdue, which makes me sad. But whatever. Okay, but to close out his tweet, Robert Evans finally says, and also I just gotta say, thank you to Robert Evans for actually just voicing your opinion. I don't really get a whole lot of replies or anyone voicing your opinion regarding this. And at least he didn't come off disrespectful and say, Nebraska's gonna win it all because we're Nebraska, go Big Red! I'm sorry to Nebraska fans for saying that. For basically saying it like that. I was not trying to disrespect y'all, but at least he didn't come off like that. He was giving his honest takes on the Big Ten. So, anyway, the last thing he said was Northwestern races Rutgers for the bottom. Okay, this is something I kind of disagree with. I understand Northwestern has had a lot happening. Now, he could have said this just because of frustration with Northwestern, but I don't think Northwestern's racing Rutgers for the bottom. Did Northwestern get like a bunch of good players in the transfer portal? And yes, they did lose Temi Thomas Ilara and Hannah Lisiak through the transfer portal, as I'll be seeing Hannah Lisiak at Long Beach State for quite a while at this season. But I don't think Northwestern's going to be racing Rutgers for the bottom. Now, unless, of course, every player is in the transfer portal and Northwestern doesn't have a real team, or if they pull a Chicago Untouchables and they don't show up, then we could have that discussion. But for the time being, I don't think Northwestern will be racing Rutgers for the bottom. I think Northwestern is going to have a lot of question marks regarding this whole Northwestern debacle, but honestly, I don't think they'll be racing Rutgers to the bottom. I don't think they're going to have the season like they did last year, especially with all this whole Northwestern dark cloud over their head. Thanks, everybody who decided to sink your dirty claws into Northwestern and all your stupid things I'm not going to get into. But I digress. But to close out on that, I don't think Northwestern is going to be racing Rutgers to the bottom. But I don't think they're going to be anywhere near the top either. I just think that they'll probably be like middle of the... They'll probably be middle of the like bottom. They'll probably be midway borderline of the bottom. That's just how I look at it, in my opinion. So, again, not trying to disrespect Northwestern and whatnot, but I just don't think they have the dog in them or the wildcat in them. So, in my opinion, I think Northwestern is probably going to be I think they're right where they belong. But we'll see where they end up at the end of the season. And hopefully for their sake, they don't lose off too many of their players because of this whole Northwestern nightmare. I know Julia San Giacomo is going to make a huge impact for their team. And they've got other really talented players that they got through the transfer portal. My big question is that hopefully this whole Northwestern debacle is basically behind them and that the women's volleyball team can basically just look ahead to their season and basically not look back. But I digress. But that is basically going to do it for the Big Ten Women's Volleyball Conference. And I guess I'll make a little bit of a take on Indiana and Maryland. They finished 500, and I'll be seeing Indiana when in the Long Beach State tournament when they play the likes of Washington and UCLA. I wish I could have seen Indiana against Long Beach State, but I just have too much going on that Thursday. For Maryland, I want to say they can maybe make leaps and bounds of maybe possibly finishing higher than 9th. But again, the teams 1 through 7 are just way too better than them. And I'm not sure what we're going to get in terms of Indiana. So it's going to be tough to see what Indiana and Maryland can do. And then for Purdue, I think 5 is kind of respectable just because I think Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Penn State are just better than them. I think Purdue has a lot of upside in terms of their youth, and getting Jordan Poulter's younger sister is a huge plus for their team at the setter position. But they can only go as far as every other player not named Ava Hudson takes them. Just because, for me, I really think it can't just be Ava Hudson. Ava Hudson cannot go Brandon Rattray. As talented as Ava Hudson is, she just cannot carry the team by herself. It has to be every other player helping her out. Not just in terms of swinging at the ball. It has to be digging the ball and blocking the ball and serving the ball and whatnot. So, time will tell. But on that note, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate it. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate it. If you listen at work, I appreciate it. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate it. Make sure you check out my NVA articles. It is on the NVA website. It would be very much appreciated if you did look at those. I definitely do put in a lot of work in terms of doing those articles and whatnot. Shout out to the chat room. It's Drewski, the host of Heart of Texas Sports. Also, Mikey Two Guns, Mike Pat, and Adam Carnes, as well as Patty Backs. I definitely do appreciate everybody tuning in. I will be back on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, probably at noon Pacific time, but maybe a little later. We shall see. But until then, for everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy all the volleyball action, or soon-to-be volleyball action, and I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!